Well, hello. Let me remove this for just a second. We don't need it just yet. I just want to say a few things. Hello. Hope everybody's doing well today. Welcome to day, is it 3? 4 of the free web development bootcamp. It's so good to have you all here. If you're joining for the first time, hi. My name is Ramon. My friend Jess and I are doing a couple boot camps to help folks get started with responsive web development with the free code camp materials. And what we're doing is a self-paced boot camp, no signups required, no fuss, no muss. Everything is fine. This is self-paced, and most importantly, recorded on YouTube. So if it's super late where you are and you'd like to go to bed, go to bed. It's totally fine. We're gonna be back. We're gonna be doing this live for the next couple of weeks. So let's throw out a few links, including some new ones that I'm quite excited to share with you. So first of all, code of conduct. We expect everybody to behave according to behavioral standards that make everybody healthy and happy. So please, bit.ly /BWC COC DOD. Let me start that over. bit.ly /BWC COC. If you want to keep up with the schedule of the bootcamp, good news. Oh, I'm going to show this as well. I'm very excited. I had to write so much HTML for this, but it worked. Hold up. So, bootcamp schedule. I'm going to drop a link here in the chat. And then I'm going to open up my browser and show y'all. Oh, check this out. Check this out. Oh, let me remove that code of conduct. Hey, there we go. Look, we have a schedule now. Cool. So you will find every day that we're doing this, every stream. If you come back later, you have also got links to the previous recordings of everything. So yeah, we're going to be doing this for the next 4 weeks, all through Thursday, 24th. So yeah, you can come and find all of the links, all of the dates right here. So that's the bootcamp schedule, badwebsite.club /webdev-bootcamp-2023. I'm going to bring myself back real quick. Hello. Let's talk Discord. If you want to join the conversation, bit.ly /BWC-discord-invite. We have the forum on Free Code Camp, bit.ly /BWC-bootcamp-forum. And all of the recordings you're going to find on YouTube, youtube.com/@badwebsiteclub. Okay, that's all the links, folks. So I hope everybody has had a good boot camp so far. We're covering so much stuff. Don't worry if you fall behind. Remember, this is self-paced. Can I share the link in the chat? I just did. Let me put it in again. Give me a sec. Boot camp schedule. Oh, you know what? I shared it only on YouTube. I'm sorry. Let me share it on all the chats. That would be easier, wouldn't it? There we go. Bootcamp schedule. Aha. Anyway, okay, cool. So let's hop right in. Yeah. So we're doing the responsive web design certification. Oh, I want to see what Noob says here. What I did is I copied all the code in the free code camp editor into VS Code, and my output in live server was different. Interesting. Oh, Vil says there are no links here in the YouTube chat. Right. How am I going to do that? I don't actually know of a way to put links into the YouTube. I think YouTube ate the link because it didn't come from the Bad Website Club account. Weird. Let me try that one more time. Oh, Sebastian shared it? No, you didn't because it's YouTube is eating up the links. You know what? I think StreamYard is eating it up because it's posting from my account. So here's what we're going to do. Badwebsite.club. It's not the best solution, but I think it should work. Does that work, folks? I hope so. Badwebsite. Dot. Oh, that's annoying. Well, we're going to have to find a way to make that easier, folks. Sorry about that. I'm just going to try and put a / there. Give that a try, because I don't think that's a URL. Anyway, let's hop right in. So on Tuesday, we did the cat photo app. Yesterday, we had Jess teach us all about... Oh, it's not showing up, huh, CZMT? I guess just share the link in the Discord and we can find it there. Yeah, sorry about that, folks. I didn't anticipate that YouTube would be silly about links. Sebastian makes a good point. I can share it in the description field afterwards. I'll do that. So, okay. I gotta stay focused. We got stuff to do today. I'll share all the links afterwards. Thanks, folks. So today we're gonna be doing CSS colors. I'm quite excited about this because CSS colors are really interesting. And what we're going to be doing, if we click on Start Project, is we're going to be building what looks like markers. So we're kind of going to be drawing these markers using CSS. And a lot of what we've done a lot of what we're going to be doing today, we've done a little bit before, writing some HTML. Yesterday, we learned some CSS, but we're going to be expanding that into some color theory stuff, which should be really fun. As always, folks, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I'm going to be collecting questions and answering them at the end. If there's anything super urgent that comes up, please don't worry. We'll make sure. Oh, Vil, yes, it's so late there. Please do get some rest. Great. So we're going to be drawing these markers. Let's hop right in. So web pages, we got a fresh HTML page that's completely blank. What we need to do is add the parts we've seen before, which is a doctype HTML tag and an HTML element with a lang attribute. So let's start with that doctype. Remember, it's got the bang doctype HTML. Then we have our HTML tag. So there we go. Oops, I forgot. See, this is what happens when you rush. Your HTML element should have an opening tag with a lang attribute of n. So here we're telling our website, hey, I'm in English. There we go. We did it. We pat ourselves on the back, pat, and we keep going. Great. Now we're going to be adding a head element within our HTML element. Again, this is stuff we've done before. We're setting up the scaffolding of our website. And just after the head, we'll add a body. Let's do that. So we'll format the document so it looks organized. We'll check our code, and it works. We pat. We keep going. Cool. So next, we will be adding the title to our document. So we're going to add a title. This is going to show up at the top of our browser. If you haven't seen that before, here it says, for example, learn CSS colors by building a set of colored markers. The title here will dictate that, and it goes in the head element. Colored markers. There we go. Cool, that's done. We pat, we keep going. Great. Now we're going to be telling our website how to encode our characters on our website. The HTML is going to be made up of a set of characters that we write. And here we're telling our computer, hey, use a universal set of characters. There are different types of sets of characters. I think ASCII, for example, is an American set of characters, but we want to make this more internationally viable, so UTF-8 is usually the standard to go with. Of course, there are other standards that are a lot more varied. So we will add a meta element with the attribute char set to UTF-8. And remember, meta tags are self-closing, so we don't need the /, we don't need a closing tag. Just one of those consistencies. Cool, pat, let's keep going. Next, we're going to be adding the viewport tag so that we can make our website look nice and similar on all kinds of devices, like mobile phones and fridges and stuff. So name attribute set to viewport, and the content attribute will be set to this whole thing here. I'm going to be lazy. Yeah. Let's paste that in. There we go. Boop. Nice. Pat, pat. Look at that. We're already 4% of the way. Cool. If you're doing this, remember, okay, so one thing to note, we're doing this in collaboration with Free Code Camp, but we're not part of Free Code Camp. So they do this for free. It's all open source. If you can swing it, feel free to throw them a couple of bucks a month. I myself do this on a different account, but this is a fresh one for teaching. So this is gonna pop up every now and then, but don't feel pressured. All right, let's keep going. Where were we? Great. Some content. Yes, let's add an H1 element. Remember, this is the big number one header. And this will set to CSS color. And all of we've been writing so far of HTML hasn't really shown up until now. So that's cool. There we go. Check our code. It looks good. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Great. Now, we're going to be working now with a CSS file. This we saw a little bit yesterday with Jess. You see, we've already got a styles.css file in our project. Now we need to tell the HTML file, hey, please use these styles. So that's going to be a link element. And it's got a couple of attributes. One of them is ref, where we're going to tell it, hey, this is a style sheet, and an href, a ref, which is going to tell us, cool, where is this style sheet? And that's in the file styles.css. So I'm going to close that. So now we've integrated our CSS into our HTML. Check our code. Your link element should have a rel attribute with the value style sheet. Now look at that. How silly of me. I made a typo. That says ref. Should be rel. My bad. There we go. Pat. A little drink of water. Oh, great. Now we're in line 1 of our styles.css file. Let's start writing some CSS. What are we going to do? We're going to have a CSS rule that targets the H1 element to set its text align property to center. So for all of our H1s on our page, there we go. I was like, where are the curly brackets? So for all of the H1s, we're going to set text align to be center. Did you see that? Check it out. It moved from the left. See, it's there on the left. And then when I typed in center, it moved to the right. Well, to the center. We could move it to the right. Now it's all the way on the right. So we do alignment in CSS. But you learned that yesterday, so I'm not going to keep us here. Check our code. We did it. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Cool. So now we're going to add some elements that will eventually style into color markers. We're going to be using div. Here's the thing about div. Div is an interesting element because div stands for, like the name is a divider or a division. Can't remember which one of the two. But it's definitely one of those two. And we use them mostly to either put content in places or, as we're going to be doing now, doing a little bit of art from a blank rectangle. So we're going to be adding a div element and set its class attribute to be the name container. And the cool thing about classes is we can give these classes any names we want as long as they're readable by CSS and consistent. So we can reuse this class to draw more than one container. So we've done as required. It's below the H1. It's got a class named container. Let's check our code. Hey, pat, pat. Let's keep going. Great. So within the div element, add another div element and give it a class of marker. So see, now we've got our container. Inside that container, we're going to add another div with a class set to be marker. I'm going to close that div as well. And there we go. So inside our container, we've got our marker. And that's nothing's showing up yet because we haven't given it any style or content. So let's check our code. It looks good. Pat, pat. We keep going. Ooh, now we're going to start adding some color. Excellent. So in order to target a class in CSS, to select a class, we're going to use the selector with a dot. So when we say dot and the class name, we're telling CSS, hey, please target the any element that has this class, and the dot is going to be important here. So cool. We're going to create a new CSS rule that targets marker, and it's going to have the background color, whoopsie, property set to red. Now, we should have expected to see some color here, but we're not. The reason for that is, well, Free Code Camp agrees, but what about the rest of y'all? We do actually have an element in here that is indeed red, but the thing is, without any content, divs by default will have neither a height nor a width. If I were to give it a height, check it out. Height, let's give it, I don't know, 10, 20 pixels. Look at that. Now it's showing up. Yeah, learner says it correctly. Div has nothing in it. Well, it's not just that it has nothing in it. Because it has nothing in it, it doesn't infer or come up with a size. By giving it a height, we're saying, cool, please show up. Great. So we'll leave it as is. We're done. Pat. Let's keep on moving. We're already at step 12, folks. We're doing good. Great. So the background color is applied, but since there we go, has no content in it, it doesn't have a height by default. Set the height property to 25 pixels and the width property to 200. So there we go. So we'll set our height. See, this is what happens when you get ahead of the exercise. They're teaching us things we already know. So 200 pixels. Cool. So there's our first marker. Check our code. Passes, pat. Let's keep going. So our marker would look better if it was centered in the page. And we're going to be doing what we did yesterday with Jess. We're going to be using margin left and right to automatically tell it, like, have an automatic left margin and an automatic right margin. What's cool is that we're going to be doing this in order to center the marker in our div, in our container. How cool is that? So by telling it, hey, make all the margins automatic, we're good. Learner's asking, are start and end recommended now? I don't know what start and end are. Could you please elaborate? Cool. So we've set our margin to be automatic. Did we do it? Yeah, we passed. Pat. Let's keep going. Cool. So now we've added one marker. We're going to add another 2 markers. So in our container div, add 2 more div elements and give them each a class of markers. So these are going to be pretty identical to this. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, folks. I'm going to copy and paste. Nice. Cool. So it kind of looks like we have one big chunky marker, but it's actually one on top of each other. Learner's saying margin start instead of margin left. Hey, listen, I don't know about this. Could you please send us perhaps an MDN link where you found this? Cool. Let's check our code. That looks good. Pat. Let's keep going. All right, so we've got now 3, but they look like one. There we go, one big rectangle. So we're going to be using margin. Now we're going to be adding the margin property to be 10 pixels and automatic. So what does that mean? By using the shorthand of 10 pixels, let me put that again, 10 pixels and automatic, this is kind of a CSS shorthand for saying, hey, the top and bottom margins should be 10 pixels and the left and right margins should be automatic. So remember, height for y-axis first, x-axis second. Let me give you some unsolicited advice, if I may, folks. You might be thinking, oh, how does he remember this? I don't. I have to look it up. I sometimes forget, and that's fine. Cool. So now we see we've got some space between our markers, which is excellent. We check our code. Passes. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Cool. So now we're going to be giving each of our markers a different color. So what we can do is add a second class to each of our markers. We see here an example. This div has two classes, animal and dog. The way that these are distinguished from one another is using a space. That means that our classes should not have spaces in their names because they'll be treated as two different classes. So if I want to add the class 1 to the first marker, what I need to do is add a space and then the word 1. Now nothing's going to change because our class 1 doesn't really do anything yet, but we will shortly. Let's check our code. Excellent. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Oh, cool. Learner said it was a default to both block and inline. So there you go. Margin block start. Thanks for looking that up, learner. That's really interesting. Go check it out. But not yet. Let's finish the lesson. Cool. So now we're going to remove the background color property and its value from the marker CSS rule. Now, I suspect it's going to make them disappear. Do we think so? So they have disappeared to our eyes, but they're still 3 200 by 25 pixel rectangles, each separated by 10 pixels and centered. So we check our code. Looks good. We pat, pat. We keep going. All right. So now we're going to have a new CSS rule that targets the one class and set its background color. Okay, so we're moving our declaration of the red marker to just the first marker. So we're making just the first marker red. That makes sense. Cool. Pat, pat. Let's do this and keep going. So now we're going to be adding the classes 2, if I could spell that, there we go, and 3 to the second and third markers. Looks good. Hey, pat, pat. Let's keep going. And now we're going to set the class 2 to have the background color green, and 3 will have the background color blue. Fabulous. So that's 2, which has a background color set to green. Look at that. It showed up. And then 3 will have the background color set to blue. Now, if you were yesterday with Jess, we were seeing that we have these CSS colors that are HTML colors. There's 140 of them, if I remember. Don't worry about memorizing them. A lot of the time, what we're doing is using different ways of writing colors, which we're going to be covering shortly. You did it. Pat, pat. Cool. Now we got red, green, and blue. Red, green, and blue. That sounds familiar. So the way we are going to be writing colors mainly in CSS is using something called RGB, red, green, blue, which is a model for creating colors in electronic devices. And it's kind of like mixing paint. Like it says, this has a certain amount of red, certain amount of green, and a certain amount of blue. In printing, by the way, fun fact, you use cyan, magenta, yellow, and black to create colors. But for this project, we're going to be using RGB. And so in CSS, what we can do is say, and we're going to do that here in this exercise, let's take our container, which remember is the div that has our 3 markers, and we're going to tell it, hey, have a background color, which remember is going to like be behind the 3 markers. But instead of giving it a CSS color name, we're going to be using the RGB function. So it's made up of 3 values, and you can see here, we're going to be starting with 0, 0, and 0. So 0 red, 0 green, 0 blue, which gives us black, the absence of color. Cool. We're going to see what the values are going to be, could be just in a minute. Pat. So, cool. Free Code Canvas keeping up with me. It's saying like, cool. If you want to have RGB, you tell it how much red, how much green, and how much blue you want. So the value can be anywhere from 0 to 255. Why this value is kind of interesting. It comes from the way computers are architectured, the chips and all that stuff. This is called an 8-bit color. an 8-bit number, pardon me, meaning it could go anywhere from 0 to 255, which I believe is 2 to the power of 8. So 2 times itself 8 times is 256. So it's a range of 256 colors. This is just because of how our computers are architectured that it's a sensible color to have in the browser for CSS. But don't worry too much about memorizing that number. Again, this is something you have to look up every now and then, and that's totally fine. So we're going to be setting our first marker. Instead of using the color red, we're going to do the same color red, but with the RGB function. So we're going to give it all the red, no green, and no blue. Now it's back to the same red. But what happens if we put in, for example, all the red, no green, all the blue? Check it out. Purple. Of course, purple, blue and red make purple. What happens if we put all the green, all the red, and all the blue? White. So white is when you pump in all the color. What happens if you do like only half, like 127? Am I calculating that correctly? Maybe. See what we get. Kind of a fuchsia kind of thing. What if I take that away? What do we get? Orange. So this is how we combine colors in CSS using the RGB function. There are other ways of writing colors, and we're exploring those in a bit. But for now, we're just writing RGB red. Pat, pat. Let's keep moving. So cool. Our marker is still red, which is fantastic. We're going to be doing now the same thing for the second and third markers. So background color here is going to be pure green. So in order to do that, we need 0 red, all the green, and no blue. Green. Now, for the third marker, we're going to be doing RGB once again. No red, no blue, no green, all the blue. Blue. Great. There we go. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Got this. We got this. Cool. So while the red and blue markers look the same, the green one is looking pretty intense. And so what's going on is that the HTML green reserved color is green, but not quite as intense a green. It's like a little bit more subdued. And so what we're going to be doing here is restoring that sort of more calm, less screaming green by using the value 127, which is kind of halfway. It's a darker green. If we actually take away even more, it becomes that's almost an invisible green. So yeah, this represents the intensity of how much green we put in. So halfway between 0 and 255. Look good? Yeah, pat, pat. Let's keep going. Great. So now we're going to be adding a little bit more vertical space between our markers and the edge of the container element. So, and yesterday we covered the difference between padding and margin. Now, if you remember Jess's really good explanation yesterday, padding is kind of like the bubble wrap you put inside a box, whereas the margin is the bubble wrap that you put outside the box. So we're going to be using padding to describe, for top and bottom, it's going to be 10 pixels. If I could type, yes. And the the left and right padding are going to remain at 0. So now you can see we've got a nice amount of space between the container and our markers. Good stuff. Is it good though? It is. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. So, we're going to start combining colors now. And in order to do that, we're just going to restore our green marker to be 255, the most intense green there is, so we can start playing around with colors. Looks good. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Look at that. We're 27% of the way done with this lesson. I'm going to get as far as we can and give you as little homework as possible. Great. So now that we've got our RGB colors, now we're going to start combining them. Oh, cool. We were experimenting with this before. Cool. So we're going to set our container to have all 3 colors set to 255. Look at that. Red and green make yellow. And all of them, as we remember a few lessons ago, make white. So that's done. Hey, pat, pat. Next, we're going to combine pure red and pure green, which should give us yellow. Yeah. So now we're just playing around with colors, getting to know these color combinations, pat, as we were doing before when I was playing around. Ooh, if you combine green and blue, you get cyan. Nice. Pat. I really love playing around with colors. I find it really fun. It feels like I'm painting, but on the web. So for the third marker, we're going to combine pure blue and pure red, which should give us purple. Nice. That's my favorite color. Pat. Great. So now we're going to learn to make tertiary colors, which is when you combine a little bit of color. So for example, in our first marker, we're going to set green to, instead of 255, be 127, which gives us orange. Nice. We saw that before. Pat. Next, we're going to make this tertiary color spring green. And so what we're doing here is messing with the intensity of these colors to make new colors. So green is maximum, blue is 127, which should give us spring green. I like this shade of green. It's very calm. Cool. Pat, let's keep going. And for our third tertiary color, we're going to combine magenta with blue. So blue is at the max value and red is 127, which gives us, violet. Nice. Pat. Cool. So that's how we mess around with colors. There are 3 more tertiary colors: chartreuse green, I hope I said that correctly, azure, and rose. So cool. So let's see. In the first marker, red is 127 and green is maximum. So 127, green is maximum. That gives us, what is it called? Chartreuse green. Very nice. The second marker for azure is going to be green half, blue maximum. I see what we're doing. We're sort of switching these values around. So that's azure. Well, it's a nice color. And for rose or bright pink, it's going to be red maximum, blue 127. 127. And that's rose. I love this stuff. Oh, wait, I'm not going to pat yet. I didn't check. There we go. Pat. Let's keep moving. Oh, we are doing great, folks. Great. So we're going to adjust the values in each of our markers so that the background color for each element is set to pure black. So if we want them all to be pure black, we just want to set all of these values to be 0. I don't know if you know this. You can double click on a word or a number to select it. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. Double click, 0. Is that what they wanted? Nice. Pat. Let's keep going. Cool. Yeah. As if you're just joining in, free code camp, open source, free, collaborating with us. If you want to donate some money to them, if you can donate some money to them, feel free. Don't feel pressure to. You can also come back later. I'm donating on a different non-learning account, non-teaching account. So we'll ask that later. So now we're going to be talking about color wheels, where instead of applying a different amount of red, green, and blue, we're going to have a wheel of colors which are going to complement each other. So 2 colors that are opposite each other are called complementary. If 2 complementary colors are combined, they produce grade. But when they're placed side by side, they produce a strong visual contrast and appear to be brighter. They're going to be looking into this color wheel theory next, which is super fun, like a wheel of like red to blue. So we'll set the red value to be maximum. In the first marker, we're going to go maximum red. In the RGB function for the second marker, green and blue to produce cyan. So, and you see, like, they're complementary colors because they're opposite values. See? 255, 0, 0, 255, 0, 255. So they're opposite, so they kind of contrast stronger. Nice. I love, color theory is, it's always it's something we're always learning with programming. Sometimes you need to, you're a little bit rusty like I am with color theory. So it's really nice to do this and get back into it. So this contrast can be really distracting if it's overused on a website and can make the text hard to read if it's placed on a complementary colored background. So we can choose one color to be a dominant color and use its complementary color to accent to bring attention to certain content. So we're going to be doing that with the H1. We're going to use the RGB function to set its background color to cyan. I see what we're doing here. So the background color is going to be cyan. Cool, RGB. And remember, cyan is 0 red, 255 green, 255 blue. Look at that. The background around the H1 is already cyan. Great. Pat, pat. But what about the color of the background? So we'll use it in the one CSS rule. We'll use the RGB function to set the background color to black. And then we'll use the RGB function in the second marker to set the background color to red. Cool. So all dark, and then 255, 0, 0. And we can see that there's a strong contrast between the cyan and the red. And as FreeCodeCamp says, it kind of draws our eyes into the red marker. There's a really handy tool when we're designing websites to sort of bring users' attentions to certain buttons or links. And all through color theory, which I think is super cool. Cool, so we're going to be restoring that second marker to be black. Is that good? Yeah, pat. And next, okay, cool. We're going to remove the background color of our H1 to restore it to be white. I think we're going to move on to the next thing we're going to learn. Let's keep going. So we're going to start adding other details to our markers, starting with the first one. So we're going to change the class 1 to red. Now this is going to be interesting. When I change 1 to red, notice the marker disappears. The reason, catfish. I also learned recently how much contrast means for accessibility for people with visual impairments. This is an extremely valid point. If you put text on top of a background where the colors aren't too different or aren't too far apart, it's going to be difficult to read. And I will admit, like, it's one of the things I struggle with when I'm reading websites, to have that extremely low color contrast, where you can use maths to figure out, like, is this a good color contrast or not? There's some resources that I'll share later on as well. Thanks, Catfish. Cool. We've changed our color 1 to red, and it's disappeared because, and we're going to see in the next lesson, pat. I was like, did I pat too early? No, we're good. So the reason for that is because, sure, all of the stuff we were doing on the one, on the one class, well, it's no longer being applied to that marker because that marker no longer has the class 1. So we're going to now change that 1 into a red because this is meant to be the red marker. Cool. And it's showing up again at pat. Nice. And cool. We'll be restoring that marker back to red. So now it's the red marker. Good stuff. At pat. We're just going through a bunch of them. Cool. So instead of 2 and 3, these are now going to be called green and blue with the express purpose of having the green and blue markers. Of course, they don't show up yet, pat. Because we need to change the names of the classes as well. So we'll be doing that. Green and blue. David making an excellent point that even if for example, the device you're working on isn't all that up to speed or like difficult to work with, this kind of color contrast is really important as well. And on small devices, on like, if you have like a small tablet, a small phone, look what David says. When there isn't enough contrast, it doesn't show up in our projector, which is absolutely valid. Thank you for bringing that up, David. Cool. So we've changed our classes. They're now green and red, but we haven't changed the color yet. Pat. We're going to be doing that in the next one. Oh, but we're not going to be using RGB. We're going to be using the hexadecimal colors. Now, this is really interesting. If you haven't worked with hexadecimal before, I'm going to give a quick background and completely mess this up. So if somebody in the chat, please come shout at me. We're going to be using hexadecimal numbers to denote how much of each color. So it's kind of like RGB, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So just like before, we're going to be using, just like before, we're going to be using a certain amount of red, certain amount of green, certain amount of blue from 0 to 255. But we're going to be denoting this. Let me just find that. Where's my hashtag? Whew. So what we're going to be doing is using hexadecimal numbers to do this. Now, if you're not familiar with it, hexadecimal is a number base, right? We use a decimal base from 0 to 9. When we get to 10, we add a digit. You might have seen in binary, we have two digits. We have two numbers, 0 and 1. When we get to 2, we add a digit. With hexadecimal, it's from 0 to 15. When we get to 16, we add a digit. However, there are no symbols for 10 through 15, so we use letters instead. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A is 10, B is 11, C is 12, D is 13, E is 14, F is 15. When we get to 16, then we have a 1 and a 0. So in hexadecimal, 1, 0 represents the number 16. It's a bit weird, but you get used to it, trust me. So when we want to have a color in hexadecimal, if we wanted to have black, we have to have 6 digits. The first 2 are red, the second 2 are green, and the last 2 are blue. So 2 digits in hexadecimal can be anywhere from 0 to 255. Because I'm about to get completely mess this up, because it's 16 to the power of 2. 16 to the power of 2 is 256, I think. Bear with me, please. So if we wanted to have black, for example, we would have 0 red, 0 blue, and 0 green. If we wanted to have white, we would have 256 red, which is FF. That's the maximum value. Then maximum green and maximum blue. If we wanted to have pure red, we will have maximum red, FF, 255 in hexadecimal, 0 green, and 0 blue, red. For this exercise, Catfish, thank you so much. Doing math live is scary. 16 times 16 is indeed 256. So if we wanted to have pure green, which this exercise demands, we would have 0 red, maximum green, 0 blue. Here's an example of a color with 4B red, 53 green, and 20 blue in hexadecimal. Let's see what that looks like, just for fun. That's brown, like a greenish brown. Very cool. So if we've done everything right, our code passes. Pat, pat. Let me move on to the next exercise. Oh, look at that. Free Code Camp is very kindly explaining hexadecimal. So, yep. So 0, 0 is 0% of that color. FF is 100% or 255. So the equivalent of writing 00 FF 00 is RGB with 0, 255, and 0. And David's saying, if it doubles the hex number, if you just put 1 in, try 0F0 for pure green. So this is a shorthand that CSS automatically does, where if you only have 3 digits, it's assuming you want double for each one. Very correctly put, David. So this is the equivalent of 00FF00. So it's like, okay, there's a 0, an F, and a 0. So 00, double F, 00. Thank you. So we're going to lower the intensity of the green by setting the green value of the hex color to 7F. So 0 red, 7F. There we go. 0, 0. Now, you might be wondering, do I need to write these letters in capital? You do not. That's equivalent. It's fine. CSS understands it both ways. I wonder if Free Code Camp is going to accept it, though. It does. Pat, pat. Nice. Cool. So that's a lower intensity green. Now we're going to be doing something called HSL, or hue, saturation, and lightness. Now, this is going to be super interesting. Oh, learner says there's a new syntax for RGB. Give us a link. Give us a link. Please. Sorry, I didn't ask with please. I'm very rude. Cool. So we're going to be, instead of RGB, we're going to be using a new function called HSL, which accepts three values. A number for 0 to 360 for hue, a percentage of 0 to 100 for saturation, and a percentage of 0 to 100 for lightness. Now, remember that color wheel I was talking about before? 0 to 360, you know, the amount of degrees in a circle. In this circle, red is at 0 degrees, green is at 120 degrees, and blue is at 240 degrees. Let's play around with that real quick. So HSL 000 shows as white because there's no, the color is red, but there's no saturation and no lightness. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's first mess around with, oh, thank you very much, learner. There's the link for color value RGB. Excellent. So let's put the color to be, what is it? Let's try red, 0. Now it's not showing up just yet. This is because we've got the other two values to worry about. The first one is saturation, which is the intensity of a color. 0% for gray, 100% for pure. Now, right now it's showing up as white. If I put this at 0, and we do need a percentage. So right now the color is gray. However, it's still not showing up. This is because the last value, lightness, also needs to have a proper value, which is a percentage. And now things are different. Notice it's black. That's because there's no lightness to this color. If I were to make this 100%, then it would be complete white. But what about that grayness? What if I put this at 50%? Not much going on. What if I put this at 100%? Still white. That's because the lightness is 100%. So what if I change this value a little bit? Oh, let's put this to 10. Oh, let's set this to 20. Watch what's happening with the color. It's getting a little bit lighter as we go. 30, 40, 50. Oh, that's 650. 60. Notice it's a gray that's getting lighter. And you're saying, okay, but you've got the color wheel set to red. How do we make it color? That's where saturation comes in, the intensity of the color. 10%. Notice it's getting a little bit more colorful. 20. Now we've got like a, I'm actually really bad at color names, so I'm not going to even try and guess. Maroon? I don't know. I'm not going to even try. 50%. Look at that. It's got like a wine red thing going on. Maybe I'm completely wrong. It's a little redder. Well, that's not a number. A little redder. 80%, a little redder. 90%. Where's my 9? Oh, look. Ooh, compare the bottom one and the top one. Let's go for 100%. Now it's like a pure, intense red. The more lightness we apply, the closer we approach to white. Yeah? Now it's getting lighter. Not grayer, but lighter. Cool. So that's how you play. Sorry, I got distracted playing around with this. So we're going to set our hue to be 240 degrees. 240. We're going to set our saturation to be 100. And the lightness is going to be 50. And notice it's pure blue. This is the equivalent of RGB 00255. Eh? Pat. Well, that was fun. Ooh. Now we're going to start working with gradients. This is another function in CSS called linear gradient. So This is interesting. When you're working with linear gradients, you're not actually applying colors, but it's actually creating an image element and is usually paired with the background property, which can accept an image as a value. So in our red CSS rule, we're going to change our background color property to background. And you're going to see that this is going to be equivalent. So instead of background color, now we're going to start applying gradients. So this won't change because it's the same background. The background just happens to be a color. When we work with background color, CSS expects a color. When we apply CSS property background, that gives us a little bit more flexibility. Let's check our code. Looks good. Pat, pat. How far are we into this? 51%. Folks, I'm going to go a little bit over time. I hope you don't mind. So linear gradient is a function that accepts a couple of values. First is a gradient direction, and then the first color, the second color, and you can actually apply more. I believe you can apply more colors. I'll get you all a link after we're done with this lesson to see what kind of values are possible here. But for now, we're going to be talking about the gradient direction, which is the direction of the gradient. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. And we're also going to apply the two colors. And these can be any combination of types of colors. It can be a name color. It can be a hexadecimal color, RGB, or HSL. So we will be applying a red to green gradient along a 90-degree line on the first marker. So red, I'm going to get rid of this. And we're going to start with a linear dash gradient and pass it the value 90 degrees. And notice the deg, that's short for degrees. Very important we leave that there as a gradient direction. This isn't going to show up yet because we've applied the direction, but no colors yet. We'll be doing that in the next exercise, I believe. Pat, pat. So now we're going to be using RGB function for the colors. So the first argument, this first color argument is going to be RGB pure red. Remember how to do that. That's 255, 0, 0. So that's the first part of our gradient is going from red. Still doesn't show up yet because we don't have a to color. We're going from red to, pat, let's see, green. So we'll use a comma here and put in our next color, which is going to be 0, 255, 0. Now, look at this. We have a gradient from red to green. Very classic, very, I want to say early 90s. Late 90s, early 2000s internet colors. Love it. It's got a bit of that word art thing going on. I'm aging myself. I'm sorry. Cool. So linear gradient is done. Does it work? Yes, it does. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. So it can accept any kinds of colors. So what we're going to be doing, use the RGB function to add pure blue as the third color argument. Great. So now we've got a gradient that's going to go from red to green to pure blue, which is 255. Look at this. Red to green to blue. Very cool. I like it. Pat, pat. Very bad website club colors. Amazing. Next, we're going to be doing stops for these colors. Because you see, it goes very cleanly like it, cesium after my own heart. I miss word out. I miss word out too. So what CSS does automatically, what the linear gradient function does is it says, cool, we've got 3 colors here. I'm going to evenly distribute the flow of that gradient. But what if we wanted to have more control over it? What we can do is have a linear gradient here and said, yeah, this is going to be red for 90% of it, and the rest is going to be black. So in our linear gradient function, we're going to add a 75% color stop after the first red color argument. Do not add color stops for the other color arguments. So for our red, we'll add a space and 775%. Check it out. Now linear gradient is like, cool. So this gradient is 75% red, and then the rest we evenly distribute. So this is cool because it gives us control over our gradient. CSS is super powerful, y'all. What do we got? Is it good? Yes, pat, pat. Let's keep going. I want to get y'all as far as we can so that you don't have to have that much homework. So we are now going to use these gradients to make our markers. Because remember, we're drawing markers here. We're going to be using a gradient to make these markers now look a little bit more marker-esque, marker-y. So instead of 90 degrees, we're going to turn our gradient so it's 180 degrees, which means instead of going left to right, our gradient is going to go, I won't spoil it. Here, have a look. Top to bottom. 75% red, and then the rest is green and blue. Cool. Pat, pat, let's keep going. Next, we're going to set the color stop of red to 0, the color stop of green to 50, and for blue to 100. Cool. So 0% for red. We're going to do 50% for green and 100% for blue. 100%. If I could type, which I cannot. There we go. Cool. So now it's like, cool, this gradient is going to be like a little bit of red, 50% blue, green, and a little bit of blue. Cool. That looks good. Pat, pat. It's got a bit of a, I just can't help look, it can't stop feeling like it's like a word art kind of thing. Great. So now we're going to be applying different shades of red to make this look a little bit more like a marker, because this looks more like a rainbow right now. So, oh, hello there. Oh, somebody remembers doing this exercise when they started learning HTML and CSS. That's awesome. RGB function. So the first color argument, which is currently pure red, we're going to change that to be 122 red, 74 green, and 14 blue. So that first color's got like a darker shade of red thing going on. We're good. Pat ourselves on the back. Pat, pat. We keep going. For the second color, is that right? Yes. We're going to be applying a more intense red. So look at, and you can tell the intensity by the amount, right? 245, not all the way intense red, but significantly more red. A little bit green, so like 62 green. And a little bit of blue, so 113 blue. Check it out. So it's got like a fuchsia-y thing going on. Sweet. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Wonderful. So now the third one is going to be still a pretty intense red. Halfway intense red. 162. Our green is going to be 27. And our blue is also going to be 27. So now you see, look at that. Now it's got like a realistic kind of shading thing going on, which is quite cool. Check our code. Looks good. Pat, pat. And we'll move on. So now that the red marker is looking more realistic, we're going to be doing the same thing for our green marker. So first we'll change background color to background. Pat, pat. We're going to go a little bit faster now. We're going to do the same thing, a linear dash gradient, with the first argument being the direction. So 180 degrees. Don't forget the deg, very important. And we'll use, for the first color argument, a hexadecimal color. Cool. So 55 for red, 68 for blue, green, and 0D. And remember, it doesn't have to be capital. You can do it either way. Just be consistent is my advice. Unsolicited advice. So that's our first color. Like a very mild green. Pat, pat. Very subdued green. Our second one is going to be also hexadecimal. This is going to be 71 for red, F5 for green, and 3E for blue. And there comes our gradient. It's looking a little more gradienty. Pat, pat. And for our third color, we're going to have, again, a slightly more subdued green. So that's going to be hashtag 11. And hexadecimal colors always have that hashtag. 11 for red, 60C for green, and 31 for blue. Ah, look at that. Nice and realistic looking. Cool. That's our green marker, right? Even without the color stops, you might have noticed that the colors for the green marker transition at the same points as the red marker. At 0, at 50, and at 100. And that's because linear gradient is, as I said, automatically calculating these for you. Ah, cool. So it's telling us, hey, go back to your red marker and remove those color stops because it turns out those are being calculated to those values automatically. Nice. And that's the joy of writing code when you delete stuff you don't need. Trust me, pat, pat, it feels great to delete code that you don't need. Cool. So if no gradient direction is provided, it arranges colors from top to bottom or 180 degrees. So what it's saying here is, hey, if you don't provide a direction, it will automatically apply 180 degrees. So that's good to know. Turns out we don't need that 180 degrees if we're not going to have anything that's not 180 degrees. So we're cleaning up our code. I love cleaning up code. Pat, pat. Let's keep moving. Great. Yeah. Collaboration with Free Code Camp if you can, of course, because it's open source. They do all of this volunteering. And so if you can donate, fantastic. If you can't, you can come back later. I'm doing it on a different account for learning. So what are we doing now? Ah, cool. It's time for the blue marker to have a gradient. So we'll remove the background. Cool. Pat, pat. We'll remove the color, pardon me. And we're going to start applying. Ooh, okay. So we're going to be using the linear gradient function, and then we're going to start using HSL. Oh, I like HSL. It bends my brain in a really fun way. We're using linear gradient. So the first argument is going to be an HSL color. And when you're doing stuff like this, your editor will usually help you to tell which bracket is matching the other. It can be a little tricky, but if you find errors like this, maybe go back and look at your brackets and make sure they're balanced. So cool. 186 for hue. So along the color wheel, we're stopping a little bit past blue. 76% saturation. Remember, that's the intensity of the blue. And 16% lightness, which remember is the light, like black to whiteness of the color. Doesn't show up yet, of course, because we still need our second argument, pat, pat. So let's do our second color, which is also an HSL. Good stuff, HSL. And this is probably going to be more intense. So that's 223 for hue. So along that color wheel. 90% saturation. That's an intense color. And 60, I keep putting in square brackets by accident. 60% brightness. Look, there we go. So a darker blue to a more intense one. Nice. Pat, pat. We're going to need our third color now, which I suspect is also an HSL. Nice, nice. I like HSL. It's so interesting. 240. So it's a little bit further along. I think that's pure blue. 56% saturation. So it's a little less intense a blue. And 42%, meaning it's a little darker. Yeah, look, there's our gradient. Magnificent. We done good. Cool. Pat, pats. There's our three markers. Whew, with gradients. Now we're at the end of the hour. I'm going to go on a little bit. Feel free to drop off. Remember, this is all recorded. We all have busy lives, and it's late for some of you. But I want to make sure I don't leave us with too much homework. So what we're going to be doing next is, now that we have our colors, we're going to build the marker sleeves. So inside our first marker div, the red one, we're going to have a new div and make the class sleeve. Cool. And we'll close that as well. For me, it's way early. It's 10 in the morning here in Vienna. It's a good time here. Cool. So doesn't show up yet because, of course, it doesn't have any height. Remember, because it doesn't have any content. And because it doesn't have any content, it doesn't have any height. So cool. That's done. Hey, pat. Let's keep going. Let's draw our sleeve. So we'll create a new CSS that targets the class sleeve. That's early. Okay, fair. So the width property is going to be 110 pixels. There we go. The height property is going to be 25 pixels. And if you recognize that number, it's because 25 pixels is also the height of the marker itself. Doesn't show up yet because, well, let's find out. Right now it's transparent. So cool. Our code passes. Pat. Let's keep moving. Ooh, so now we're going to give the color, the sleeve a transparent white color. So I'm going to be setting the background color of our sleeve to be white. Now, look at that. We cut off a chunk of our marker. What's going on? Well, we set it to white. So we're drawing that sleeve on top of the red marker. And by drawing it on top with a white color, it's not combining those colors, but rather it's applying it on top because the sleeve is fully opaque, meaning you can't see through it, right? So check our code. Looks good. Pat. So I suspect what we're going to be doing next. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Free code can't beat me to it. Opacity describes how opaque or non-transparent something is. For example, a solid wall is opaque and no light can pass through. But a drinking glass is more transparent and you can see through the glass to the other side. So there's a value in CSS called opacity, where we can set a value from 0 to 1.0. So 0 is minimum opacity and 1 is 100% opacity. So the closer we get to 100, the less see-through something is. So in our sleeve, we're going to set our opacity to be 0.5. Notice what happens. Now it's a semi-transparent, a 50% transparent white on top of a red marker. I think that's cool. Pat. Oh, wait. Yes, pat. Good. Cool. Another way to do this is using something called an alpha channel. Similar to the opacity property, the alpha channel controls how transparent or opaque a color is. So we're going to remove that opacity and we're going to use the alpha channel. So right now we're back at 100% opacity. So we're good. Pat. Because in the next exercise, we're going to be, using RGB once again. Oh, I'm sorry, not RGB, RGBA. So that's red, green, blue, and alpha. So we're going to change our background color to be RGBA. And it's going to look familiar because it's going to be the red value, the green value, the blue value, but then the alpha value, which is equivalent to that of opacity. So 0 red. Oh, sorry, if we want this to be white, right? So pure white with 50% opacity, that's all red, all green, all blue, and then 50% opacity, which is 0.5. 5. So this is equivalent to having a white background color and an opacity of 0.5. Your mileage may vary about how it's up to you how you prefer to do this. If you prefer to have one line of code that has everything, or 2 lines of code, one for the color, one for the opacity, they're equivalent. And what I always recommend with this sort of thing is there perhaps isn't a best practice per se, except for consistency. So if you're going to be using RGBA, stick with RGBA. If you're going to be using RGB and opacity, then stick with that. Is my recommendation. So cool. That's a 50% white color. There we go. Pat. I think we got a little more time, right? So my sleeve is looking good, but it would look even better if it was positioned toward the right of the marker. One way to do that is to add another element before the sleeve and push it to the right. So we're going to add another div with the class cap before the sleeve. Class is set to cap. Div. There we go. So there's our cap. There's our sleeve. Nothing happened because our cap doesn't have dimensions. Doesn't have a height or a width. That's what we're going to be doing shortly, but it works. We added what we added. Pat, pat. Let's move on. So we'll add a new CS rule for caps. Am I going to make a div soup? Look, we're doing some art here. We're drawing markers. David makes an interesting point. Sometimes using the separate opacity property is better if you're doing a transition and want it to tween smoothly. So we haven't done transitions yet. David, could you tell us in the chat a little bit about what transitions and tweening are, please? Don't stress too much. We're going to be covering those later in this boot camp. So for our cap, we're going to have a width of 60%. 60 pixels, not percent. Excuse me. And our height is going to be 25. Remember that 25? That's the height of the marker. So that's done. Let's check our code. Lovely. Pat, pat. So it looks like our sleeve disappeared, but don't worry. It's still there. Our new div cap is taking up the entire width of the marker and is pushing the sleeve down to the next line. So the sleeve is actually hanging out somewhere here. This is because of the default display property for div elements is block. So when two blocks elements are next to each other, they stack like blocks, block, block. For example, your marker elements are all stacked on top of each other. To position the two div elements on the same line, set their display properties to inline block. Create a new rule to target both the cap and sleeve classes and set display to inline block. So we can do that in CSS with .cap, comma, .sleeve. So this is now going to do some CSS. Whatever I write in here is going to apply to any elements with the cap or sleeve classes. So that display, if I could spell, is going to be inline dash block. Now they're next to each other. And now it looks like that's got a nice like markery thing going on, which I'm excited about. We did it. Pat, pat. Let's keep moving. In our last project, we learned a little bit about border color. So all HTML elements have borders, but they're usually set to none. With CSS, you can control all aspects of an element's border, set the border on all sides or just one side at a time. For a border to be visible, you need to set its width and style. So what we're going to be doing is adding a left side border to our marker. So border left width. So that's the width of our left border of our sleeve. I'm going to set that to be 10 pixels. Now notice it doesn't show up yet because we still need a color and a style. Let's check our code. Nice. Let's keep going. Oh, David, thank you so much. Whoopsie. CSS can do animations. They call them transitions, and they mostly work by setting one of the values set to start, declaring a finishing set, and the timing for it to slide from one set to the other. Cool. Thank you so It's hard to explain with the character limit. Can't wait for the bootcamp lesson. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate it. So yeah, that's how we do animations. They're called transitions in CSS, but we'll get to that later. Whew. Okay, next we're going to be setting the style of our border. Left style, and we're going to set that to be solid. Now, hey, we have a solid border. It's black. Good. Let's keep going. Code passes. Pat, pat. We'll do a couple more, and then I'm going to let y'all go. So our border should be visible now. If no color is set, black is used by default. We can see that there. But to make our code more readable, it's better to set the border color explicitly. In our sleeve CSS rule, let's add the border left color property with the value black. So the reason this is more readable is that if we wanted to come back and be like, wait, why is this black? We can do it there. And if we wanted to change it, then we have the option of finding that line of code and changing it. So this is not so much for the computer, but for us as expert programmers. Go, passes, pat, pat. Look at us just going through it. Ooh, now, instead of having to do border left width, border left width, border left style, and border left color, what we can do is combine these three into one line using the property border dash left. So this lets us do the width. The first is going to be the width. Then we're going to, no comma. It's not a function. Then the style, which is going to be solid, and the color, which is going to be black. So what's cool about that is that with this, we have the same equivalent as this, but fewer lines of code. And you know how I feel about deleting code. I'm a fan. Cool. Well, it looks good. Pat, pat. All right. My border is looking good, but to make it, my marker is looking good, but to make it even more realistic, you can change the border style to double solid borders. So instead of solid, we're going to have double. I did that wrong. It's not black that I want to change to double. It's solid that I want to change to double. Look at, oh, now that's looking fantastic. Now that looks like a proper marker. All right, folks. I think it's time for us to wrap up for today. We've made it 84 steps in. That's 84 pat-pats. Let's go back out and look at what we've got left to do. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lessons left in this project. The homework is going to be to please finish the rest of these. Tomorrow, Jess is going to come back and teach us how to make HTML forms by building a registration form. Now, let me be very clear. First of all, there is no rush to do everything at once. Yeah, this is a self-paced bootcamp. We can go at our own pace. I want to give folks the opportunity to ask us questions. So drop them in the chat, please, if I haven't answered something yet. While you do that, I'm going to drop a couple more links. First of all, the bootcamp schedule. If you go to badwebsite.club/webdev-bootcamp-2023, you will find the bootcamp schedule there. It'll look like this. If you're wondering why I'm not putting it in the chat, it's because for some reason, YouTube blocks me from putting it in the chat. So I apologize. But it'll look like this. And there you'll find all of the comments you need. All of the times and sessions. It will get updated as we get more guests and speakers. For example, tomorrow, I said we're going to have our lesson about registration form. On Monday, we're going to do a survey form. We're going to have Rizal, my dear friend Rizal from GitHub, teach us Git and GitHub. And our partner streams with Couchbase, and you'll see that for the next 4 weeks. Yeah, so that's the schedule. If you want to join the Discord, that's bit.ly/BWC-Discord-invite. Join in. We'll manually let you in, and then you can start chatting with folks. The forum is there as well, bit.ly/BWC-bootcamp-forum. And all of these videos you'll find recorded on youtube.com/add-bad-website-club. So that's me, friends. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, with Jess, who's going to teach us some cool new things. Until then, I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for joining. Thanks for asking questions. And I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.